Dr. Clara Jensen was on the brink of a breakthrough. For years, she had been tirelessly working on the concept of interdimensional travel. It had begun as a hypothesis, dismissed by her peers as science fiction, but Clara was determined to prove them wrong. Armed with a PhD in quantum mechanics and a fierce, unyielding curiosity, she had built a prototype device in the basement of the prestigious but underfunded Eastbrook Institute. It was a strange, cylindrical machine with an intricate series of energy coils and shimmering holographic panels, each displaying the fluctuating patterns of quantum data. Clara had always been fascinated by the idea of alternate realities, where every decision could split the timeline, creating a new version of Earth. Her mind raced with the possibilities. What if there was a universe where humans had discovered sustainable energy a century ago? Or one where AI was the dominant species? The potential was infinite, but the dangers were just as real. On the fateful day when everything went wrong, Clara had been calibrating the machine for a more extensive test. The first series of experiments had gone smoothly, but she knew that this time, she was pushing the boundaries of her invention. She double-checked the data on the screen. Everything looked good. Too good. Her hands hovered over the activation controls, the hum of the device resonating through the walls. With a steady breath, Clara pressed the button. Instantly, a blinding flash of white light filled the room, and for a moment, Clara thought she had made a catastrophic mistake. Her vision blurred, and the air around her seemed to warp, twisting in ways that made her stomach churn. She staggered back, heart racing, but before she could comprehend what was happening, the world around her dissolved. The lab, the walls, the familiar hum of the machines, all of it vanished, replaced by a vast, empty expanse. The ground beneath her feet was made of shifting silver dust, and the sky above her was a swirling kaleidoscope of colors. She tried to speak, but no sound emerged. Her mouth moved, but it was as if the universe itself was muffling her voice. Panicking, Clara turned in circles, her breath quickening. She thought she saw figures in the distance, but when she focused on them, they disappeared, like fleeting shadows. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. "Clara," a voice whispered. "Clara, do you understand now?" Clara froze. The voice had come from nowhere, yet it felt familiar, as if it had always been with her. A faint figure materialized before her, a ghostly image of herself. The doppelganger's eyes were cold and empty, its expression one of amusement, even malice. "What is this?" Clara gasped, her hands trembling. "You, in the rift now," the figure replied, its voice detached and hollow. "You, broken through to the multiverse, Clara. Welcome to the beginning of the end." The moment the words left the figure's lips, Clara's mind exploded with a flood of sensations, flashes of countless Earths, each one different from the next. She saw civilizations that had risen and fallen in an instant, skies ablaze with alien ships, and cities that stretched impossibly high into the clouds. She saw versions of herself in different places, different lives, each one more distant from the Clara she knew. And then, like a lightning strike, the realization hit her. "I, opened a portal to other worlds," she whispered in disbelief. "I, done it." The figure nodded. "And now, you, bound to them. You will move between these worlds, Clara. Every choice you make will echo across the multiverse. But be warned. You, not the only one who's aware of this." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The figure's smile twisted. "You're being hunted." Before Clara could react, the figure flickered, its form dissolving into the swirling colors of the rift. And just as quickly as the vision had appeared, everything around her shifted once again. In an instant, Clara was no longer in the strange, ethereal expanse. She was back in the Eastbrook Institute, her lab, her equipment, everything just as it had been before the machine activated. But something was wrong. The air felt heavier, the lights flickered ominously, and when Clara turned to look at the screen, it displayed a series of coordinates that didn't match anything she had entered. They were from another world. Clara stumbled back, her mind reeling. What had she done? And who was hunting her? As she looked around, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Somewhere out there, in the vastness of the multiverse, there was another version of herself, an evil version, who had already figured out how to use the rift for her own purposes. Clara had opened the door to a dangerous new reality, and now, she would have to survive in a universe where everything she had ever known could be turned upside down, including her very existence. But for now, the most pressing question remained. Could she stop herself from destroying everything? And would the multiverse even survive? Clara paced frantically around her lab, her hands running over her hair as she tried to make sense of the chaos that had erupted within her mind. The machine sat quietly in the center of the room, humming faintly, as though it were still alive. The light from the overhead bulbs flickered intermittently, casting long, eerie shadows across the concrete floor. A cool sweat formed along her brow, and she wiped it away hastily. She had to focus, had to think clearly, but how could she, when her mind was teetering on the edge of panic? She walked over to her computer, her fingers flying over the keys, trying to analyze the data that had been left on the screen. The coordinates she'd seen earlier, they didn't make any sense. She didn't remember inputting them, but somehow, they were there, flashing in front of her like an ominous warning. She pulled up the multiverse algorithm she had created for her experiments, running it alongside the coordinates, trying to triangulate their origin. As she did, she felt a creeping sensation, as if something were watching her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She turned, her heart pounding, but the lab remained empty. Her breath caught in her throat. No, not again. The voice from earlier echoed in her mind, cold and mocking. You're being hunted. Clara shook her head, trying to dispel the lingering sense of dread. She couldn't afford to let fear control her. Not now, not when the fate of every reality could be at stake. Her fingers moved faster, desperate to make sense of the data. She didn't notice at first, but there was something new, something out of place, a faint crackling sound. It was so subtle she could have easily missed it, but once she heard it, it seemed to grow louder. It was coming from the machine. The cylindrical device hummed again, more urgently this time, as if responding to her attention. Clara's pulse quickened. Could the portal be opening again? She stepped toward it, unsure of what she would find. The swirling colors of the rift flickered to life inside the device's core. Suddenly, the machine's screen exploded into a flurry of static. It was like watching the world fracture before her eyes, endless realities intersecting, colliding, forming and unforming at an incredible speed. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly uncontrollable. The air grew thick with energy, crackling in every direction. A violent gust of wind swept through the lab, knocking over papers and scattering equipment. Clara tried to steady herself, but the force of the wind was too strong. The portal, the rift, was expanding. Her mind raced. She had to shut it down. But how? A loud crash interrupted her thoughts. The walls of the lab seemed to warp, distorting, as if they were bending toward her. A dark shadow filled the doorway, and before Clara could react, a figure stepped through the threshold. Her heart stopped. It was her, or at least, it looked like her. This version of Clara was taller, more imposing, her face hardened with an arrogance that Clara barely recognized. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. You're not ready for this, the doppelgänger said, her voice low and smooth, almost like a whisper of poison. But I am. Clara staggered back, her mind trying to process the impossible. This couldn't be happening. She had thought, hoped, that the figure in the rift had been a hallucination, a byproduct of the stress, but no. This was real. The evil version of herself stepped closer, her every movement deliberate, like a predator closing in on prey. You've opened the door, Clara, she said, her tone mocking. And now, the fun begins. What do you want? Clara stammered, her voice faltering as she instinctively stepped back. What I want? The other Clara chuckled darkly. I want everything. All of it. The multiverse, every timeline, every version of Earth. And you, my dear, are in my way. She raised a hand, and the air around them crackled with a dark energy that Clara couldn't quite comprehend. Clara's mind raced, searching for a way to fight back, but she had nothing. She hadn't prepared for this. She wasn't even sure how to stop the rift from expanding, let alone fend off an evil version of herself who had clearly mastered something she had barely begun to understand. The rift continued to pulse, more violently now, its edges flickering like a dying star. Clara's doppelganger stepped closer, eyes glowing with power. "You don't even know the power you've unleashed, do you?" the dark version of Clara said. "Every world you visit, every reality you disrupt, it all leaves a mark. And now, that mark is mine to exploit." Clara felt a cold chill run through her veins. She's right, she thought. The rift wasn't just a doorway. It was a pathway, a bridge that connected all the universes, and every action she took would ripple through them. And this version of herself, she had already figured out how to use the multiverse to her advantage. "You think you can stop me?" her doppelganger sneered. "You've barely scratched the surface. You opened the door, now you'll pay the price." Clara's chest tightened as she backed toward the machine, her fingers frantically searching for the control panel. She needed to close the rift, but could she? The dark Clara raised her hand, and a pulse of energy shot toward Clara, sending her crashing against the wall. The force knocked the wind out of her, and she struggled to stand, dazed. "Every version of you is bound to this," the evil Clara said, stepping forward. "And soon, all the versions of you will serve me." Clara's breath was shallow, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to stop her. She had to close the rift, or everything, every world, every reality, would be lost. Her fingers brushed against the control panel again. Desperation fueled her as she tried to focus. The multiverse was too vast, too chaotic to control, but there had to be a way. She couldn't do it alone. "Clara," a voice whispered in her ear. She turned, confused, but there was no one there. The voice was faint, distant, but it was real. It was her voice, another version of herself, reaching out across the dimensions. Maybe, just maybe, she took a deep breath. She couldn't give up now. "I won't let you win," Clara whispered, determination flashing in her eyes. And with a final, desperate push, she activated the machine. The rift flared with a blinding light, and for a moment, Clara felt herself being torn apart, split into 1,000 versions of herself, each of them struggling to survive in a reality that was not their own. But somewhere, deep in the chaos, she felt a pull. A force guiding her. She wasn't alone in this. And she wasn't done fighting. The blinding light from the rift engulfed Clara, and she felt her body being stretched and pulled in every direction, as if the very fabric of space and time were unraveling around her. She gasped for breath, her chest tight, but the sensation was too overwhelming to fully understand. It was like being inside a storm of pure energy, chaotic, erratic, and all-encompassing. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The disorienting pull on her body ceased, and Clara collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the lingering dizziness from her vision. The lab, the machine, her doppelganger, they were all gone. The world around her was different. She looked up. This wasn't Eastbrook Institute. This wasn't even Earth. The sky overhead was a deep, vibrant green, swirling with strange patterns like the aurora borealis, but much more vivid. The ground beneath her feet was smooth, metallic, and stretched out into the horizon in every direction, vanishing into an endless, undulating landscape. Giant crystalline structures jutted out of the earth, glowing softly as though they were alive. Her heart raced. Where am I? She staggered to her feet, eyes scanning the bizarre surroundings. She hadn't meant to end up here, wherever here was. The rift had thrown her into some unknown reality, a place that seemed so far removed from the earth she knew. She reached for the control panel in her jacket pocket, but it was gone. The familiar device that had been her lifeline was nowhere to be found. Panic began to creep in, but she shook it off. She couldn't afford to lose her focus. "I need to find a way back." Her mind raced, running through every possibility. She had no idea where the rift had taken her, and with no equipment to help her navigate this new world, she was on her own. But she had learned something from her encounter with her dark doppelganger. The rift was not just a doorway. It was a network, a web connecting countless versions of Earth. Each reality had its own set of rules, its own history, and its own dangers. She had to be careful. One wrong move, one rash decision, and she could fracture the balance of the multiverse even further. As she started walking, the landscape shifted around her. The ground trembled faintly, and the air grew heavy, almost oppressive. Clara stopped, instinctively reaching for the strange energy emanating from the crystalline structures. Something wasn't right here. Suddenly, she heard it. A sound, distant at first, but growing louder with each passing second. It was the low, rhythmic hum of machinery, vast, mechanical, and relentless. Then she saw them. Huge, metallic creatures, their bodies like towering exoskeletons, moving with precision and purpose across the landscape. They seemed to be gathering something, collecting resources, perhaps from the crystal formations. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. This world isn't uninhabited. Her instincts screamed at her to hide, to move away, but she was too late. One of the creatures turned and locked its gaze on her, or at least, what she assumed was its gaze. Its eyes were bright, glowing slits of white light, and Clara could feel the intensity of its stare from across the vast distance. For a moment, there was no movement, no sound, just that heavy, oppressive stillness. Then, in a flash, the creature began to move toward her, its massive legs thundering against the metallic ground. Clara's pulse raced. I have to move, now. She ran, adrenaline coursing through her veins, pushing her forward faster than she thought possible. Her boots slapped against the strange ground as she darted between towering crystal formations, trying to lose herself in the labyrinth of alien structures. But the creature wasn't far behind. She could hear its footsteps growing louder, faster. The ground seemed to shake with every step it took. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't outrun it. And then, just as she thought she was doomed, she spotted an opening in the landscape ahead. A dark crevice, like a cave, carved into the side of a massive crystalline formation. Without thinking, she veered toward it, her lungs burning as she pushed herself harder. She dove into the crevice just as the creature reached the spot where she had been. She could hear it screech, a sound that vibrated through her very bones, before it stopped. She held her breath, pressing herself against the cool walls of the cave, her heart hammering in her chest. Time seemed to stretch out endlessly. Minutes passed, and the creature's footsteps eventually faded. Clara dared to exhale, though her body still shook with fear. She stayed in the crevice for a long while, too afraid to move, listening for any sign of danger. But the only sound she heard was the strange, otherworldly hum of the crystals in the distance. After what felt like an eternity, Clara carefully eased herself out of the cave, peering around cautiously. The creature was gone, but she couldn't stay here for long. She had no idea where she was, and no way of knowing if those machines were the only threat this world had to offer. She needed to move, to find answers, and most importantly, to figure out how to escape this world and return to her own. But with no way of knowing where the rift was, she had no choice but to start exploring. It was then that Clara noticed something else, something even more unsettling. There was a figure standing in the distance. A person. But as Clara stared, her heart dropped into her stomach. It was her. Or rather, it was another version of her. This version was wearing a black uniform, its eyes hidden behind a dark visor. It was taller, its posture rigid and military, like some kind of soldier. It stood still, facing her, as though it had been waiting for her all along. The figure didn't move, but Clara could feel the tension in the air. She could sense that this version of herself was different. It had a presence, a weight to it that the Clara she knew didn't possess. Then the figure's head tilted slightly, as if analyzing her. Its voice, when it spoke, was cold and mechanical. "Clara Jensen, you are trespassing." Clara froze. So, she knew her name. But how? Before she could respond, the soldier Clara took a step forward, her hand reaching toward a strange, glowing device on her wrist. Clara's instincts screamed at her to run. But she didn't have the luxury of time. The path forward seemed blocked, and running into the open landscape again might be just as dangerous. Her heart pounded. What do I do now? Clara's mind raced as the cold, mechanical version of herself took a step closer. The figure's movement was deliberate, calculated, as if every inch was part of a plan. The eerie, glowing device on her wrist pulsed faintly, casting an unsettling light against the dark, metallic landscape. The words the soldier Clara spoke reverberated through the air, each syllable sharp and uncompromising. You are trespassing. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This isn't just another version of me. This is someone who's been here long enough to become something different. She swallowed hard. She was terrified, but fear alone wouldn't save her. She had to think fast. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, Clara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took a cautious step back, but the soldier Clara didn't move. She stood still, as if waiting for Clara to make the next move. It felt like the calm before a storm. The soldier's visor glowed faintly as it tilted again, scanning Clara from head to toe. There was no warmth, no recognition in the gaze behind it. She's been through this. She's become something else, something colder. You should not have come here, the soldier Clara said, her voice now flat, almost robotic. You have no idea what you've disrupted, what you've unleashed. Clara clenched her fists, a surge of defiance rising within her. What do you mean? What have I unleashed? This isn't even my fault. I didn't know the portal would do this. The soldier Clara's head tilted again, this time in amusement. Foolishness. You opened a rift in the multiverse, and now you must pay the price for it. Her hand pressed a button on the device, and a low hum filled the air. Clara felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shook violently, throwing her off balance. She stumbled, barely catching herself against the side of the crystalline formation. The metallic landscape around them groaned as the tremors intensified. The soldier Clara remained unfazed, her gaze never leaving Clara. You are not the first, the soldier continued, her voice growing colder, more threatening. There have been others like you. You've disturbed the delicate equilibrium of these worlds. And for that, you will be held accountable. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Others like me? She could feel the weight of the soldier's words pressing down on her, like a trap slowly closing around her. What do you mean, others like me? She asked, her voice shaky now. What have I done? What's going on here? But the soldier Clara didn't answer. Instead, she took another step forward, the glowing device on her wrist flickering in time with the pulsating hum. Clara instinctively reached for the edge of the formation, her mind racing for an escape route. There has to be something, some way to outsmart her. But just as Clara's thoughts began to form, the ground split open beneath her feet. The chasm yawned wide, an abyss of dark, swirling energy that stretched into the unknown. Clara gasped, her body lurching forward as she instinctively tried to move back, but it was too late. The soldier Clara's arm shot out, a mechanical tendril of light wrapping around Clara's wrist and yanking her toward the abyss. No, Clara screamed, her body jerking as the force tightened around her. Panic flooded her chest. She clawed at the tendril, but it was like trying to break free from an iron vice. The soldier Clara's expression was unreadable as she pulled Clara closer to the rift. You are a threat to everything, the soldier said, her voice cold as the void beneath them. You don't even understand the chaos you've set in motion. You will be eliminated, and everything will return to its rightful order. Clara's mind raced. She couldn't die here, not like this, not when she had barely started to understand what was at stake. The portal, the rift, she had opened something that she couldn't close, something that she didn't yet fully understand. The very fabric of reality was unraveling, and her actions were the catalyst. But I have to survive. I have to stop this. With all the strength she had left, Clara yanked her other arm free from the soldier's grip, using the momentum to twist and kick at the device on the soldier Clara's wrist. For a split second, there was hesitation, a flicker of something human behind the cold exterior. Clara's foot collided with the device, sending a shockwave through the soldier's body. The tendril of light loosened for just a moment, and Clara scrambled to pull herself away, her hands desperately finding purchase on the jagged edge of the formation. She kicked again, harder this time, and the soldier Clara stumbled back, unbalanced. The moment of weakness was enough for Clara to slip free. "Go to hell!" Clara shouted as she bolted toward the nearest opening, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't look back, she couldn't afford to. The soldier Clara's voice echoed behind her, low and ominous. "This is not over. You cannot run forever. The multiverse is mine to command." But Clara didn't have time to process the threat. The ground beneath her feet continued to tremble as the massive machines in the distance began to move, their mechanical limbs thrumming with power. They were closing in on her, and she didn't have the luxury of finding another hiding spot. She needed to get to higher ground, and fast. The maze of crystalline structures was shifting, the landscape warping with every step. Clara knew the clock was ticking. She had to find a way to stop the rift from tearing apart the fabric of reality itself. But first, she had to survive long enough to figure out how to fix the chaos she had unleashed. With the sound of footsteps echoing behind her, Clara ran. She didn't know where the path would lead, but one thing was certain. Every reality was now connected, and her every move was shaping the fate of the multiverse. And somewhere, in one of those infinite worlds, her darker self was watching. Clara's lungs burned as she ran, her body pushed to its limits. The tremors beneath her feet had subsided for the moment, but the tension in the air felt thicker than ever. The landscape continued to warp around her as she moved, the crystalline formations bending and reshaping in ways that defied logic. The maze-like structure she was navigating seemed to stretch on forever, the same jagged walls and metallic terrain repeating in an endless loop. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. No more mistakes, no more delays. The soldier Clara's voice still echoed in her mind, its chilling finality lingering like a shadow. "You cannot run forever. The multiverse is mine to command." What did she mean by that? Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was something larger at play here. Something beyond the rift, beyond the machines, and beyond even her darker self. She had opened the portal without truly understanding the consequences. She had no idea what kind of web she had entangled herself in. But one thing was clear now, she was not the only one playing this game. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she rounded a corner, her eyes scanning the horizon for anything that might give her an edge. She needed a way out, but the world around her seemed like a prison, trapping her in a never-ending loop. The metallic structures rose higher and higher, casting long shadows in the growing dusk. The ground beneath her feet was slick, almost unnaturally smooth, and every step she took echoed louder than it should have. Suddenly, she heard it, a low, guttural hum, distant at first, but growing louder with every passing second. The machines were closing in again, their massive forms emerging from the horizon. Clara's stomach twisted with fear. She wasn't just running from a single threat anymore, she was running from an entire army of them. She stumbled, her foot catching on the slick surface, but she quickly regained her balance. "No, I can't fall now. I can't." As she sprinted forward, her eyes caught a glimmer of something in the distance, a flicker of movement against the metallic horizon. Someone was there, someone who didn't look like the machines or the soldier Clara. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She slowed her pace, cautiously approaching the figure. It was a person, tall and cloaked in a long, flowing coat. Their back was to her, and they stood motionless, as though waiting for her to approach. There was something familiar about them, something that made Clara stop in her tracks. For a moment, the figure remained still, their silhouette outlined against the strange glow of the crystal landscape. But then they turned slowly, revealing their face. It was another version of Clara, but this one was different. Her hair was longer, wild and untamed, and her eyes, they were wild, full of defiance and something else, knowledge. There was an aura of quiet power around her, like she had been here for much longer than Clara had. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but there was a sharpness to her gaze that made Clara uneasy. "You've come far," the other Clara said, her voice soft but firm. "But this place, this world, will break you if you're not careful." Clara's chest tightened. She couldn't help but ask the question that had been haunting her since she arrived. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was knowing, calculating. "I'm you, but not in the way you think. This world has changed me. This multiverse has changed me. And if you're here, it means you've already set things in motion." Clara took a cautious step forward, her heart racing. "What do you mean? What's going on here? What's happening to the multiverse?" The woman's gaze hardened. "You opened the door. The rift, the portal, it was never supposed to be opened. Not like this. You've shattered the walls between worlds, and now they're all connected. Each universe, each version of Earth, they're all bound together by the threads you've pulled." Clara's head spun. She had known the rift was dangerous, but she hadn't realized the full scale of the damage she had caused. "But, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to understand it, to learn how the multiverse worked." The woman's expression softened for a brief moment, as though she could see the guilt and confusion in Clara's eyes. "The multiverse doesn't work like that. It's not something to be understood or controlled. It's a web of chaos and possibility. And you've become part of it. The question now is whether you can survive the consequences." Clara clenched her fists, feeling a surge of frustration. "But what am I supposed to do? How do I fix this? I can't just leave it like this." The woman nodded. "You can't fix it by running. You can't fix it by hiding. There's something else you need to know. Something important." Clara leaned in, desperate for any answer. "What is it?" The other Clara's eyes flickered to the horizon, where the machines were now visible in the distance, their massive forms moving steadily toward them. "You're not alone in this. Your darker self. She's been hunting you across the multiverse. But she's not the only one. There's something worse." Clara's breath caught. "Worse than her?" The woman nodded gravely. "Yes, there's a force that exists beyond your darker self. Something older, more powerful. It's using you, using your mistake, to weave its influence across the universes. And if you don't stop it, if you don't learn how to control the rift, it will tear apart everything. Every reality." Clara felt her legs give way beneath her, and she dropped to her knees, the weight of the revelation crashing down on her. The multiverse wasn't just an experiment. It was a living, breathing network, and she had torn a hole right through it. And now she was caught in the middle of a war between forces she barely understood. Forces that were using her actions, as a weapon. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. "I have to fix this. I have to stop this." When she opened her eyes again, the woman was gone. There was no trace of her, no sound, no sign of her presence. Clara stood up shakily, her mind reeling. The machines were getting closer. Her darker self was out there. And the force behind the rift, the one the woman had warned her about, was still pulling at the edges of every reality. "I have to stop it. But how?" Clara stood motionless, staring into the empty space where her other self had just been. The sudden disappearance of the woman left her with a gnawing sense of unease. There was something about that encounter, something deeply unsettling. She had been told she couldn't fix the multiverse by simply running or hiding, that she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. But what, then, was the solution? How could she possibly stop a force so vast, so interconnected, that it seemed to stretch across every version of reality? Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant rumble of the machines, still marching steadily toward her. Clara's heart beat faster as she forced herself to focus. She couldn't stay here. She had to move. The thought of facing the soldier Clara again sent a chill down her spine, but the machines posed an even more immediate threat. Their heavy steps were getting closer, their massive forms casting long, looming shadows over the crystalline landscape. There was no escape unless she moved, no time to waste. Turning, Clara sprinted again, her breath sharp and shallow. The ground beneath her vibrated with each thunderous step of the machines, and the air seemed to thicken with every passing second, as if the very atmosphere was aware of the chaos she had unleashed. But as she ran, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was being drawn in, that the universe itself was conspiring to ensnare her. She needed a plan. Her mind raced as she ran, trying to recall everything she had learned so far. The rift, the multiverse, the soldier Clara, her darker self, the mysterious force behind it all. What was its purpose? Why was it using her? What could she possibly do to stop it? Then, a thought struck her. The web. The other Clara had mentioned the multiverse being a web of chaos and possibility. A web of threads. Clara's thoughts darted back to the glowing crystalline formations she had seen earlier. She had the vague sense that they were important, that they might hold the key to understanding how this world, and the multiverse itself, worked. Her pace quickened, the machines still hot on her trail, but something, an instinct, perhaps, told her that the crystals held answers. She reached the nearest crystal formation, its jagged edges stretching high above her. The light from its surface shimmered as if it were alive, pulsating with an energy that she could almost feel deep within her bones. She extended a trembling hand toward the crystal, its surface cold to the touch, but there was something more beneath it. A sensation of connectivity, like the threads of the multiverse were converging here, coiled tightly together within the glowing structure. For a brief moment, Clara hesitated, but then, desperation surged through her. She pressed her hand against the crystal with more force, her fingers tingling as the energy seemed to flow through her, coursing along her skin, digging into her nerves. The sensation was overwhelming, but she couldn't stop. She needed to understand, needed to find the way to stop the chaos she had created. The crystal trembled beneath her touch, and suddenly, the landscape around her shifted. The air itself seemed to bend and twist, like the very fabric of reality was warping. The ground beneath her cracked open once again, but this time, Clara didn't fall. Instead, she was pulled into the rift of her own making. The world around her dissolved into a swirl of light and sound. Clara's vision blurred, and for a moment, she felt as though she were floating in an endless void. But then, just as suddenly, the tumultuous storm of energy calmed, and she found herself standing on solid ground again. But this wasn't the crystalline landscape she had been in moments ago. It was something else entirely. She looked around, her breath caught in her throat. She stood in the middle of a bustling city, one unlike any she had seen before. Tall buildings stretched high into the sky, their surfaces gleaming with a strange, otherworldly sheen. Hovercars zipped through the air above her, and the streets below were filled with people, though their faces were different from any she had encountered. They wore sleek, futuristic clothing and spoke in a language that Clara didn't recognize. But what truly struck her was the sky. It wasn't the deep green she had seen before. Instead, it was a brilliant shade of blue, with clouds that seemed to shimmer and pulse with energy. This was another version of Earth, but it felt wrong. The air felt too thick, too charged. It was as though everything in this reality was slightly out of place, as if the entire world were on the brink of collapse. Clara took a hesitant step forward, trying to make sense of her surroundings. But before she could fully process her situation, she heard a voice behind her. Clara Jensen. She froze. The voice was eerily familiar. Turning slowly, she came face to face with another version of herself. This Clara was different from the others she had encountered. She was younger, her hair short and windblown, and her eyes wide with an intensity that Clara hadn't seen before. She stood tall, exuding a quiet authority, and her expression was hard, as if she had seen things that would break most people. "I've been waiting for you," the other Clara said, her voice calm but edged with an unsettling certainty. "I'm glad you found your way here. We have much to discuss." Clara's throat tightened. She could barely speak. Who are you? The other Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze piercing. I am you, she said simply. But I've learned to see things differently. To understand what you don't. You've opened the door. You've connected the threads. And now, she paused, her lips curling into a thin smile. Now, we can finish what you started. Clara's mind raced. Finish what? What do you mean? The younger Clara's eyes glowed faintly as she stepped even closer. The rift, the multiverse, the web. You've given us a chance, Clara. A chance to reshape everything. She reached out, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. But to do that, we need you to understand the true purpose of the threads. To weave them together in the right way. To become the master of the multiverse. Clara recoiled. No, I didn't come here to be some kind of puppet. I don't want this. The other Clara's gaze hardened. You don't have a choice. You never did. The threads are pulling us together, Clara. We are destined to weave the fabric of all realities. And whether you like it or not, you'll do what must be done. Clara's pulse quickened. This isn't right. This isn't me. But before she could react, the younger Clara stepped back, a look of cold determination settling on her face. Your dark self isn't the only enemy, she said, her voice lowering to a near whisper. There's something else, something more dangerous. And you won't be able to stop it alone. Clara's heart sank as a new realization hit her. The true battle wasn't just between her and her darker self. There was something far more powerful at work, and it was coming for all of them. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the other Clara's words settling over her like a crushing wave. The true battle wasn't just between me and my darker self. She could barely process the enormity of it. Every time she thought she understood what was happening, another layer of complexity emerged, each more dangerous than the last. The younger Clara, stared at her, her eyes burning with an intensity that made Clara want to step back. The weight of the decision she was being asked to make pressed heavily upon her. Reshape all of reality? Become the master of the multiverse? No, Clara whispered, more to herself than anyone else. I didn't come here to control it. I just wanted to understand. I just wanted to fix things. But the other Clara's expression remained unmoving, as if Clara's words were irrelevant. You already are part of it. The moment you opened the rift, you stepped into the role of the weaver. Whether you accept it or not, Clara, you've tied yourself to the threads of every reality. Clara shook her head. No, I'm not like you. I won't become a puppet of these threads. I'm not them. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed the other Clara's face. Something like disappointment, but there was no sympathy, no compassion in her eyes. You think you have a choice? The threads are already woven, Clara. They don't care about your resistance. They don't care about your will. You're already part of the fabric now. The more you fight it, the worse the consequences will be. It's inescapable. Clara's throat tightened. The pressure in her chest was unbearable. She felt suffocated, trapped in a web she didn't understand, one where every move she made only seemed to make things worse. You're wrong, Clara said, her voice a little stronger now. I won't let the multiverse turn into a puppet show. I won't become something that just controls things. She stepped back, her mind churning. There has to be a way to fix this without becoming you. The younger Clara's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. You've already made your first mistake. She stepped forward, her presence magnetic. The force you've been fighting against, the one that made you open the rift, is far more dangerous than anything we could be. It's not just a being. It's an entire presence that exists across every reality, pulling the strings from the shadows. It's the source of the multiverse's chaos, the one that feeds off the instability you've caused. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. What is it? She asked, her voice trembling. Who is it? The younger Clara's expression hardened. It's called the Architect. It's not just any force. It's a consciousness that spans beyond all dimensions. Its true goal is to collapse the multiverse into a singularity, into itself. It wants to erase the infinite possibilities and create a reality where only it exists. Clara's mind whirled. So, I'm not just fighting my darker self. I'm fighting something far worse. She took a deep breath, her thoughts crystallizing into a desperate plan. The architect. The architect's endgame isn't just destruction, it's control. Control over every reality. And I opened the portal. I created this mess. It's all my fault. The younger Clara's voice broke through her thoughts. Yes, you created it, and now you are the only one who can stop it. She looked away for a moment, as if contemplating something. There is a way to sever the threads, to undo the damage, but it comes at a cost. Clara's pulse quickened. What cost? The other Clara turned to face her, her gaze unwavering. You will have to destroy the rift. Not close it, destroy it, erase it entirely. Every thread, every connection between the universes, including the ones you've created between yourself and these realities. That means no more jumping between worlds. No more different versions of you. No more multiverse. Clara's heart sank. What do you mean, no more me? The younger Clara stepped closer, her voice softening for the first time. You will cease to exist in every reality, Clara. Your presence will be erased from every thread. You will become an echo, a ripple in the fabric of the multiverse. All the damage, all the consequences will disappear. But so will you. Clara's breath caught in her throat. No more jumping between worlds. No more me. She looked into the other Clara's eyes, feeling the weight of what she was being asked to do. To save everything, she had to give up everything. All of it. But Clara had never been someone who ran from responsibility, no matter how terrifying it was. The multiverse had become her burden, and now it seemed it was her duty to set it right. She had opened the portal. She had disrupted the delicate balance of every reality. And now, only she had the power to undo it. What happens to the multiverse? Clara asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. The younger Clara's expression was unreadable. It will reset. The architect will be defeated. The rift will close, and every universe will be restored to its original state. The worlds will return to their natural order. But the cost is irreversible. Once you sever the threads, there's no going back. Clara's hands trembled. The thought of losing everything, her life, her existence, was terrifying. But she had to do it. The architect couldn't be allowed to win. No one could control the multiverse. I'll do it, Clara said, her voice resolute. I'll destroy the rift. I'll fix this. The other Clara nodded, her face unreadable. It's not just a decision. It's a sacrifice. Are you ready for it? Clara took a long, deep breath, her thoughts racing. She thought of all the lives in the multiverse that would be saved if she succeeded. She thought of the countless versions of herself, each living their own life in their own world. They didn't deserve to be destroyed because of one mistake. But the multiverse couldn't survive in its current state. It had to be reset. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choice. I'm ready. The younger Clara stepped back, her form beginning to fade into the light. Goodbye, Clara, she said softly, her voice a whisper in the wind. May you find peace in the echoes. With that, the last of the other Clara disappeared, leaving Clara standing alone, facing the rift. She could feel the presence of the architect, like an oppressive weight on her soul, watching, waiting. The time had come. Clara stepped forward, her heart heavy but determined, and reached out toward the rift. The threads of reality shimmered in her vision, each one pulsing with energy, with possibility. She closed her eyes, focusing all of her energy, all of her willpower, into severing the threads. She could feel the rift beginning to unravel, each thread snapping in her mind like a string being cut one by one. And with a final, decisive push, the rift shattered. The multiverse went silent. For a moment, Clara felt herself floating, as though she were caught between worlds. Then, slowly, everything faded. Her presence, her existence, was no longer tethered to the threads. The architect's influence was gone. The multiverse was safe. And Clara was no more. But somewhere, in the quiet after the storm, A ripple in the fabric of reality stirred. An echo, a whisper, the beginning of something new.